UFOs, people from elsewhere, things from elsewhere, all of these things that we talk about, ghosts.
Back in 1997, a mysterious fax arrived at the desk of Art Bell, the iconic host of the late-night radio show Coast to Coast AM. The message was from a man named mel'swater, who had an unbelievable story to tell. "All right, when did you discover this hole?" Bell asked. "Well, the hole has always been there. We've been out there for a couple of years now, and, the hole has been there since we've been there. It's been there since the previous owner was there, and the previous owner was quite elderly. He was there for a good 30, 40 years before we moved in." According to Mel, he had discovered what seemed to be a bottomless pit on his property near Manastash, Washington. As Mel shared his experiences on air, listeners from all over were hooked. Could this be a portal to another dimension? A secret government experiment hidden in plain sight? Today, this story is confirmed. Scientists have finally solved the mystery of Mel's hole, and as Tucker Carlson put it, the truth is terrifying. Among the greatest mysteries lies Mel's hole, a seemingly endless abyss on the property of a man who called himself mel'swater. His story gained public attention in 1997 after a conversation with radio host Art Bell on the late-night show Coast to Coast AM located in the rugged, isolated Manastash Ridge area of Washington state. This hole captured the imagination of many due to its eerie nature and inexplicable properties. Mel, who claimed ownership of this land, said he purchased the property a few years prior, but the hole had been a fixture long before. Locals in the area treated it like a bottomless garbage dump, tossing all kinds of waste into it, yet it never filled up. Strangely, no matter how much was thrown in, nobody ever heard a sound, a thud, a splash, or any noise signaling that objects had hit the bottom. It was as if the pit swallowed everything into the void. From a distance, Mel's hole looked like a simple, unassuming pit, nothing more than a large opening in the ground. But up close, its oddities became more apparent. Measuring around 9 feet in diameter, the hole's edges were curiously smooth, contrasting the rugged terrain of its surroundings. A stone retaining wall went down about 15 feet, beyond which the hole descended into complete darkness. Mel described the overwhelming feeling of dread that the hole seemed to emanate. Even his dogs refused to go near it, despite being obedient and loyal in every other way. No amount of coaxing would get them to approach the edge. It was as if some unseen force repelled them. And this aversion wasn't limited to just his dogs. Wild animals steered clear too, as if they sensed something unnatural. Perhaps the most unsettling tale linked to Mel's hole involved one of Mel's neighbors and his deceased hunting dog. This neighbor had thrown his dog's body into the pit, only to see the same dog alive in the woods shortly after. The dog had the same collar and looked the same, but it didn't recognize its owner. Despite the neighbor's attempts to call out to it, the dog remained distant, as if it had returned from the dead but without any memory of its past life. This bizarre story only added to the legend of the hole, leaving people with more questions than answers. All around the world, people are left to wonder and form their own opinions about the truth behind Mel's hole, and Tucker Carlson is just one of them, but more on that later. Driven by sheer curiosity, Mel embarked on experiments to figure out just how deep the hole went. Using his fishing experience, he devised a plan to lower a line with a roll of lifesaver candies attached to see if it would detect water at the bottom. After letting down 1,000 feet of line, the candies remained dry and intact upon retrieval. This only raised more questions. There was no water, and still no bottom. Undeterred, Mel decided to try a heavier object, a 1-pound lead weight. He continued to spool out his fishing line, all 88,000 feet of it, which is about 15 miles long, and yet he still hadn't found the bottom. To put that into perspective, the deepest cave in the world is only about 7,200 feet, and Mel had surpassed that by more than 10 times without hitting anything. This left him and those who followed the story baffled. As if the depth of the hole were not mysterious enough, there were other peculiarities tied to it. Mel and some locals observed strange phenomena around the pit. Some claimed to see a beam of black light shooting out of the hole, a sight that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Even radios near the hole would start playing old broadcasts or music from the past, as if the pit was somehow reaching into different timelines. Others claimed that metals brought near the hole would mysteriously transform into different substances. The story of mel'shole took an even stranger turn when, according to Mel, federal agents took over the land. They forced him to lease the property to the government under mysterious circumstances. The official explanation was that the area had been the site of a downed aircraft, but many suspected the government had discovered something far more significant. With the land now under federal control, Mel claimed the payments he received for the lease allowed him to move to Australia, where he relocated. Over the years, the story of mel'shole has continued to fascinate and bewilder. The mystery was further deepened by the account of Red Elk, a Native American medicine man who claimed that his father had shown him the hole back in the 1960s, stating that it was bottomless. Red Elk believed the hole held great spiritual significance, something far beyond the physical world. The pit's mysterious depth and animal experiments, however, were only the beginning of what would turn out to be a series of even more unsettling discoveries around mel'shole. After capturing the attention of radio listeners in his first conversation with Art Bell, mel'swater returned to share more bizarre stories and experiments conducted at the site of the mysterious pit. Each revelation seemed to defy logic and science, further mystifying everyone who followed the tale. One of the ongoing debates was whether the fishing line Mel had used to measure the hole's depth had ever actually hit the bottom. Some callers speculated that the line might have already reached the bottom but remained taut due to the immense weight pulling it down. Others argued that given the sheer weight of the 80,000 feet of line, it should have snapped if there was no support. But what made this more intriguing was that there was no sound, no echo, no indication that objects thrown in ever hit anything solid. Art Bell himself had a controversial idea. Why not lower someone into the pit to gather first-hand information? While the suggestion may have sounded like a joke, it pointed to the frustration of everyone following the story. No one knew what lay at the bottom, if there was one, and each new experiment only raised more questions. One of the most unusual experiments involved lowering live animals into the pit. Mel recounted how, during one experiment, he decided to lower a live sheep into the hole. As the sheep descended, its bleating could be heard clearly for several minutes, but then, suddenly, the animal fell silent. When the sheep was brought back to the surface, Mel and his team were horrified by what they found. The sheep had been cooked from the inside out. Not only that, but inside its body was a strange living creature with eyes that bore an eerie resemblance to those of a human. The implications of this discovery were both terrifying and mystifying. What could have caused such a transformation within the pit, and what exactly was this creature? Mel didn't stop there. He mentioned that this strange entity had healed him of cancer before leaping back into the dark abyss of the hole. The fact that the hole might possess healing powers only added to its mystery, raising the possibility that it wasn't just a destructive force but also a source of regeneration, a pit that defies nature. Mel decided to drop a bucket thousands of feet into the hole, curious to see what might happen. When it was finally retrieved, the ice inside was found to be both hot and unmelting. Even stranger, it had turned into a combustible substance. How does ice, the very definition of cold, turn into something flammable? This was just one of many instances where the pit seemed to mock the laws of nature. Then there was the issue of sound, or rather, the lack of it. Normally, when you shout into a deep space, you expect an echo to bounce back. But not at mel'shole. No matter how loud you screamed, the sound simply disappeared into the abyss. It was as if the pit was swallowing not just objects, but sound itself. The silence was deafening and unnerving. One of Mel's main concerns was what might happen if a human entered the hole and didn't survive the journey. He had heard unsettling stories about animals that had died near the pit, only to later be seen alive and well, yet somehow different. Do you remember the story about the neighbor and his dead dog from a few minutes ago? While this idea of resurrection fascinated Mel, it also unnerved him. What would happen if a person died inside the pit? Would they come back? Mel also hinted at larger forces at play when he mentioned a strange incident involving fiber optic equipment being delivered to an Ellensburg warehouse, allegedly collected by an Israeli group. He didn't know if this was directly connected to the hole, but it was enough to suggest that whatever was happening went far beyond the local community. Another truck driver had reported delivering large scientific instruments from the Lawrence Livermore National Lab in San Francisco, which does work for the military, leading to further speculation. Incredibly, the story didn't end there. Mel claimed that this strange creature from the pit cured his cancer before disappearing back into the depths. The healing seemed miraculous, but it only deepened the mystery of what exactly resided within the hole. The very existence of this entity explained why animals instinctively avoided the pit. Birds refused to fly over it, and dogs stayed far away. It was clear that whatever was inside the hole affected both the living and the dead. In an odd twist, Art Bell raised the possibility that Mel could make a business out of the hole by allowing the government or companies to use it to dispose of hazardous waste. If the hole truly had no bottom, it could potentially swallow up dangerous materials, including radioactive waste, without any repercussions. Although Mel didn't outright dismiss the idea, he was quick to assure listeners that the hole hadn't had any negative effects on the local environment, even after years of people dumping all sorts of trash into it. When it comes to the location of this bizarre and often debated mystery known as Mel's Hole, there's little more than speculation and vague directions. Over the years, mel'swaters, and others who claim to have found the hole have remained tight-lipped about its exact location. All we know for sure is that it supposedly lies somewhere on Manastash Ridge, about 9 to 10 miles southwest of Ellensburg, Washington. But pinpointing its precise whereabouts has proven elusive, adding to the enigma of what might be hidden there. One person who became intrigued by the tale of Mel's Hole was Jack Powell, a geologist from Ellensburg. Jack, who had a long career in petroleum exploration and even taught geology at Central Washington University for over a decade, first heard about the mysterious hole while driving home one evening. The source of this strange tale was none other than Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM, a radio show known for its coverage of the paranormal, from UFOs to Bigfoot. As Jack listened, his curiosity was piqued. He admitted that he didn't take the show too seriously, viewing it as entertaining rather than factual, but something about Mel's Hole struck a chord with him. Perhaps it was his familiarity with the area. Jack had spent his youth exploring the Kittitas Valley, and he recalled an old mine shaft that could have been mistaken for something as fantastical as the bottomless pit mel'swaters described. This old mine, though, was probably only 90 feet deep or possibly 300 feet back in its heyday. Regardless, Jack doubted it matched the otherworldly depths claimed for Mel's Hole, rumored to be miles deep. The allure of Mel's Hole doesn't end with its uncertain location. The area surrounding Ellensburg is filled with eerie spots that could easily fit into the narrative of something supernatural lurking beneath the earth. For instance, if you're in search of the hole, driving along some of Washington's roads might heighten your sense of mystery. Take SR 900, for example. This road stretches between Renton and Issaquah, and many drivers report feeling uneasy as they navigate its dark, winding path. The dense forest that flanks SR 900 gives off an ominous vibe, especially at night when thick fog can settle in, making visibility even worse. There are no streetlights for miles, and the weather often adds to the spooky atmosphere. Some travelers have even reported seeing shadowy figures on the roadside, though whether these are real or figments of tired minds is up for debate. Another road that could give you chills on your search is US 12. This highway cuts through some of the most remote areas of Washington, and driving it at night can leave you with the distinct feeling that you're all alone in the world. The road itself is known for its treacherous curves and steep drops, where one wrong turn could send you tumbling into the abyss. Then there's SR 20, Washington State's longest highway, stretching over 436 miles. SR 20 connects the west side of the state with its eastern borders, and much of it is shut down every winter due to heavy snowfall. The road's curves and frequent poor weather conditions make it notorious for accidents, with some areas so remote that it's easy to feel as though you've left civilization far behind. If you were to stumble upon something as strange as Mel's Hole, SR 20 is the kind of place where it could happen. For those with nerves of steel, Hart's Pass Road is perhaps the most harrowing of all. Officially designated as NF 54, this road winds up to Slate Peak Lookout and is infamous for its narrow lanes and terrifying drop-offs. One of its more chilling nicknames is Dead Horse Point, a title that gives you a sense of just how precarious the route is. Squeezing a car or truck through this road feels like flirting with disaster, with high cliff drops making it a white-knuckle ride. If ever there were a place that evoked the danger and mystery of Mel's Hole, it would be this road. We mentioned Red Elk a while ago, however. He is not the only Native American who has ties to mel'shole. Back in September 2001, after several appearances on Coast to Coast AM, mel'swater received an invitation from a group of Native Americans in Nevada. They were intrigued by his knowledge of natural medicine, especially the unique plants he grew near the infamous hole in Washington. Eager to learn more about their traditions and share his research, Mel agreed to visit their reservation. Upon arriving, Mel discovered that the visit was about more than just plant medicine. The locals showed deep interest in his experiences with the mysterious hole. After spending a few days exchanging knowledge about natural remedies, they took Mel on a trip to see something extraordinary. What they revealed was shocking: a second mysterious hole located near a village settled by Basque families. This hole bore a strange resemblance to the one Mel had described in Washington. It was about 9 feet wide but had a metal collar around it, unlike the stone walls of Mel's original hole. Even more intriguing, this new hole emitted a peculiar warmth unlike any heat Mel had encountered before. And just like the original hole, sound seemed to vanish above it, creating an eerie silence that unsettled both people and animals. Mel and the locals decided to perform some of the same experiments he had conducted in Washington. They lowered a bucket of ice into the hole, expecting it to melt as it should, but instead, the ice stayed warm. When they attempted to melt it over a fire, the ice ignited and burned, producing a flame that gave off heat. This fire ice became a subject of fascination. Mel even shared on the radio how one villager used this burning ice to heat their cabin through the winter. The connection between these Native Americans and Mel's hole suggests that these strange phenomena weren't isolated. The existence of this second hole led Mel to believe there might be even more out there waiting to be found. What could these strange holes mean? Could there be a deeper connection between them that we have yet to understand? No matter how many times mel'swater tried to distance himself from the mysteries of the hole, something kept pulling him back. Even after being forced to leave Washington and travel to Australia, the enigma of the bottomless pit stayed with him, gnawing at his curiosity. It was as if the hole had a magnetic pull that he couldn't escape. And in December 2002, Mel reappeared on Coast to Coast AM with new, perplexing updates. His return didn't go unnoticed, and it quickly drew attention from authorities once again. The strangest part of his update involved the ever-burning ice. As Mel had described before, this ice didn't behave like any normal substance. It didn't melt but instead caught fire, emitting heat when exposed to flames. A barman who lived near the hole decided to use a small can of this burning ice as a heat source for his wood stove, thinking it would be a great way to stay warm during the cold winter months. What happened next was beyond belief. One day, the man returned to his cabin to find his wood stove had sunk through the floor, crashing a foot into the ground. The burning ice, instead of just providing heat, had somehow altered the structure beneath the stove, weakening it to the point where the entire stove collapsed. Undeterred, the man fixed the stovepipe and continued using it, this time with the stove sitting below ground level. For a while, things seemed fine, but within a couple of weeks, the entire cabin began to disintegrate. The walls turned to dust, and the structure collapsed, forcing the man to move in with his brothers. The incident left him baffled, and he reached out to Mel to share his bizarre story. Mel, intrigued by the effects of the burning ice, decided to consult one of the mysterious officials he had encountered during his time in Australia. This official, who had shown great interest in Mel's research on the hole, responded with urgency, requesting the exact location of the cabin and directions to the site. With little choice, the cabin owner provided the information and watched from a distance as a team arrived with cranes and heavy machinery. The team's arrival only deepened the mystery. They struggled for hours to lift the wood stove, which had become unnaturally heavy. Chains and cranes couldn't move it until, after much effort, they finally extracted it using water and sheer force. The stove was loaded onto a massive truck, and the team left without offering any explanation. This event only served to heighten Mel's paranoia. He began to feel that he was being watched, followed by unknown figures who were perhaps connected to the authorities or some secret organization. His unease grew, and he started to avoid returning to the hole, fearing that it might be discovered because of his involvement. Mel had always suspected that there was something more to the hole than just a geological oddity, and now it seemed that others were equally, if not more, interested in what lay beneath. The authorities' interest wasn't new. Mel had attracted their attention before, especially after his earlier experiments with the hole in Washington, which had led to strange occurrences, from the revival of dead animals to the eerie silence that enveloped the area. But this time, the involvement of a team with heavy machinery suggested that whatever was happening around the hole was of much greater significance than anyone had initially imagined. Despite his fears, Mel couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to continue his investigation. The pull of the hole was too strong to ignore. However, when he tried to return the next time, he was met with a far more unsettling reality than he expected. It was his last attempt to get to his mysterious hole, but this time, the government had completely shut off access. What used to be Mel's private obsession was now a heavily guarded area, fully controlled by federal agents. The official story? A plane crash, at least, that's what a man in a suit told him while people in biohazard suits stood in the background. Mel didn't buy it, and rumors began to spread. Locals speculated that the government's interest in the pit was no simple accident cover-up. Many believed that something had been found deep within the hole, something terrible enough that they needed to hide it from the public. Years later, Mel attempted to return to Washington, defying the restrictions placed on him. His daring return was cut short, however, when a strange series of events unfolded. While traveling to see his nephew, an altercation broke out on the bus, and when the police intervened, Mel blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in an alley in San Francisco, missing his wallet, keys, and, disturbingly, several of his teeth. There were marks on his arm, as though he had been injected or experimented on. Mel never made it back to his property, and it was at that point that the government completely seized control. Multiple witnesses began reporting seeing soldiers patrolling the area, while satellite imagery of the region around Mel's hole on Google Maps suddenly appeared blacked out, as if the location was being deliberately hidden. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. In Russia, a similar hole, dubbed the Kola Superdeep Borehole, was drilled down more than 40,000 feet into the earth, where researchers claimed to hear disturbing sounds, cries and screams that many believed to be the voices of the damned. Some called it the sounds of the devil. And if Mel's hole was even deeper, what horrifying discoveries had the government made that they now refused to share? Years later, scientists finally solved the mystery of Mel's hole, and the truth was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. After decades of speculation, a team of researchers dressed in hazmat suits stood cautiously over the infamous hole, prepared for what they thought was just another geological anomaly. What they found was far from ordinary. The hole wasn't just deep, it contained a bizarre energy source that defied all known laws of physics. Tucker Carlson took to his show to address the shocking discovery, stating, "It's disturbing. If this exists, what else is lurking out there that we have no clue about?" His comments mirrored the growing concern among the public and experts alike. The scientists, still reeling from their findings, revealed that the energy emitted from the hole could not be explained by any current scientific theory. One of the lead researchers, standing over the gaping pit in a hazmat suit, commented that the hole appeared to bend time and space itself. Tucker's chilling remark struck a nerve. "We've spent years thinking this was a myth. Now it's not just real, it's something far more dangerous. We're only scratching the surface of what this could mean." The mystery may have been solved, but what they uncovered was even more terrifying. What are your thoughts on this chilling discovery?